Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to let everybody settle in for a few minutes while we do that infamous step while people join. I do expect people to be joining as we start this webinar. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to what is becoming, I'm delighted to say, a welcomed and well-attended Oxentia webinar series. The title of this one is Impact, the Investor's Perspective. And first of all, let me give you a little bit of background on this. So, some of you may be aware that Oxentia has been exploring the development of a national, mainly online, venture building program. This is specifically to support opportunities coming out of universities from postgraduate through to senior PI academic level. And the idea is that this would be much more inclusive. So by discipline, it will be wider. And geographically, it will be much more inclusive. And this is something that we continue to explore. And in our journey, we start thinking about the wider range of investment opportunities that we may come across, particularly from the social sciences. And we also think back to our background, coming from Oxford in the support of deep technology opportunities in perhaps more of the hard sciences, the physical sciences, the life sciences. And then we start thinking about the investor community. And we start wondering about alignment around this issue of impact. And we start wondering whether there is alignment, because particularly we start seeing a trend and drive out of the academic community where this purpose or impact motivation to commercialize is getting stronger and stronger. So we thought maybe we should have a chat about this. So what we have tried to do, as well as inviting you all onto this webinar to contribute, and we encourage you please to write your questions in chat, which will be moderated and we'll try to bring into the conversation. But also we've brought some guests, and I'd now like to introduce these guests to you. We have Mann, Ed Phillips, Alex Buchan, and Emma Salgard Cunha. And instead of me badly introducing them, I think I'd like to allow them to introduce themselves. So Emma, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, great. Hi, thanks, Tim. So I'm Emma Salgard Cunha. I am based over at Cambridge, and I sit within Cambridge Enterprise, which is the Technology Transfer Office, Research Commercialisation Office of the University of Cambridge. And I've been at Cambridge for about 3 years now, and I lead a project which is specifically about innovation in the arts, humanities and social sciences. So I work directly with researchers, sometimes students as well, but primarily researchers working in the arts, humanities and social sciences, helping them to commercialize early stage ideas, and trying to do that pretty flexibly through a whole bunch of different mechanisms, which might include creating traditional companies, social ventures, and also through licensing and consultancy. And my background, I'm an English literature academic by training, moved back to knowledge exchange, and then found myself dragged into the tech transfer world over time. So still feeling like a little bit of an alien at times over here.
Okay, well, Emma, thank you for joining us from Cambridge. It's great to get your perspective on this issue. Moving on to Mark. Mark, please go ahead.
Well, I mean, I started off at Cambridge as well, you know, good university, that one, right? But no, I now work at Oxford University Innovation. I am now the lead for social venture creation at OUI. So all the spin-outs that are a new form of spin-out that we've developed, where we have a mission and purpose locked within the articles of association of that company. And I'm here today in the capacity of having pulled together a collaboration of universities called Impact 12, where we are raising a social venture fund together. And that was announced a few months ago, and we're now right into fundraising mode right at this time. Okay.
Mark, thank you very much. And moving on, Ed, please go ahead.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you for putting on this panel and Gitsu as well for getting everyone together. So my name's Ed. I'm an investor and the head of origination at Future Planet Capital. So we are an impact-led but profit-first venture capital group. We look at university and research center spin-outs and alumni-founded companies from around the world, primarily in the UK and US, but increasingly further afield. So we're looking in Canada, Singapore, Tel Aviv at the moment. Within the UK, we work primarily in the Golden Triangle, but also within the whole UKRI ecosystem. So one of our LPs is UKRI and DSTL, and we look at all of the research funded by the British government, as well as some more regional venture funds in Birmingham and around the West Midlands, and then a sort of UK broader focus university venture fund as well. We're primarily direct investors, so we look at tech and life sciences from seed through to IPO, but our sweet spot is usually Series A and B. But we also make LP investments, as Tim alluded to. So we have invested in things like LSI, the Oxford fund vehicle, investing in spin-outs from Oxford. We're invested in Al Ventures, the preeminent EdTech impact fund from in the States, the E14 fund around the Media Lab, and then also the X fund, which is the Harvard social sciences venture fund, which was spun out of NEA about 5 years ago. So to give you a flavor of the kind of investments we've made, I've done things like Back to Tech, the company behind the Oxford vaccine, which is probably a pretty public and good example of some of the tensions we're going to be talking about today. And then also things like Pragmatic, which is using IoT to enable recycling of plastic goods and tires and the like, spun out of Cambridge. So looking forward to sharing more.
Okay, Ed, thank you very much. And last but by no means least, Alex. Alex, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Buchan. I'm an investment director at North Star Ventures. So we're a regional venture fund based up in Newcastle. Over the years, we've been doing early stage ventures in the region, and I've been looking primarily at spin-outs out of Newcastle and Durham University during that time. I'm a life scientist by background, so I look after the life science portfolio for this for North Star. I suppose over the last few years, we've really been shifting our focus towards businesses which are actually having more impact than just just your basic startup, and this has become very much a core thesis of what we're trying to do, what we call society tech. And we are currently in the process of raising a fund for the universities up here and the research base in the northeast, which we're hoping to close by March next year, which will be aimed at very much a lot of some of the things that we've been talking about, which is reaching further into the universities, into areas where perhaps traditional spin-outs haven't really happened. And there's two elements there. One is actually looking at spin-outs, and the other one is actually building businesses using the research base. So actually bringing entrepreneurs into the region, looking what needs to be done, and then going to find answers within the research base, making collaborations between the universities and other research organizations in the region. So that's very much where our focus is lying at the moment. So
okay. Alex, thank you for that. And Alex, I'm aware that you need to leave us by 4:30.
So I apologise because I was looking forward to this, but something's come up.
Don't worry. We'll talk about you when you're gone. All right, Alex, maybe if I just start with you, let's just kick things off here and understand whether or not whether things have changed. And anybody actually on here, do we feel that there has been a change in how investors need to think about impact in the deployment of their funds, maybe even in the construction of their funds? Have things changed over time? 20 years ago, did investors need to worry about impact at all?
I think certainly when we started up here, we were interested in new technology businesses in a region which at that time was transitioning from things like shipbuilding, coal mining, etc., and needed to bring new technology in. So impact per se was definitely not on the agenda as something that we were really looking at. Having that, I think that's changed. I do think also, however, that impact or an understanding of impact is actually a very good proxy for quality of management, because it's a very complex thing, and if you can manage that, you can generally manage your business. So actually it's a really, it's always been in there at the background of our thinking, but it wasn't at the forefront. And I think over the last, I suppose, 5 to 7 years, that's where it's really changed. And I think it's been driven by new funds, driven by new investors, new LPs, people, maybe tech entrepreneurs who've made a lot of money, who are coming out and actually wanting to use that money to drive specific agendas. So, you know, I'm invested in a clean meat facilitating company, which has got an impact investor, which is looking to totally disrupt the food chain. That's what it wants to do, and that's where it's looking to invest. It's looking for that sort of impact. So that's the sort of, so we're beginning to see that. You're beginning to see a new breed of investors. The profit motive doesn't go away, so people are still looking to make money, but they're looking to make money I mean, they're focusing in different places than they would have been, certainly would have been 15, 20 years ago, I would say.
And you mentioned, you know, when you started off with North Star, and that the objective there was to go and find and build deep technology opportunities in the north. That's delivering economic impact in itself. There's still an impact angle to that.
Yeah, of course, and we, you know, the source of our funds of Europe, which was looking for jobs, it was looking for new companies created, etc., etc. And you know, but in reality, a lot of that was about numbers. And it wasn't about real, you know, what you want is the quality of businesses, and that's where you need to start really thinking about what they're doing as organisations, rather than just, okay, that's taken 20 people and put them into decent quality jobs. That's great, and that's really important. But it's, you know, it's the type of jobs, what those jobs are getting, and where those jobs are going to be in 10 years, 20 years time, because we're trying to build for the future here. We're not building, you know, we're not building for the now.
Okay. So if there is general consensus that the impact agenda has developed for investors over the last couple of decades, if there's one thing that hasn't changed, that is the desire for investors, the obligation for investors to make money for their LPs. But I sense that perhaps impact is a bit of a catch-all. And if we're not careful, we're using it perhaps in ways in which there are different definitions and meanings to different people. And Emma, maybe if I could ask you, because I know that you have thoughts of what impact means to the academics you're working with, perhaps, and that's different to maybe what investors mean by impact. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about those issues?
Absolutely, and it's interesting because it's like a conversation that came up. Cambridge is also involved in the Impact 12 project that Mark will probably speak about. And very early on, this question of, hang on, are we all on the same page when we're saying impact came up? Because research impact is a paradigm now within the universities, and research funding is tied to the creation of impact. And when we talk about impact, what we mean is really, we talk about the underpinning research piece. So it isn't that broad economic piece around job creation necessarily. It's not necessarily CSR, so it's not necessarily about good business practices, although all of these things tend to go hand in hand, of course. But it's really about taking a piece of research or insight and using that, and if possible, scaling that in order to cause an impact on particular kind of beneficiary groups on wider society. And this isn't something that we only find in the social sciences. This is right across the board. So anybody engaging in research commercialization in universities is going to be thinking about impact. It's a level of there's a measurement in terms of career development, for example, on grant capture will be tied to these impact metrics. And so the kind of the idea of being kind of impact driven as an investor may encompass a kind of wider scope, I think, than the way that the founders or the institutions are thinking about generating their impact. So there is a little bit of I'm not sure that it's a full tension, but it's a kind of widening of what impact might be as the company perhaps moves further away from those research origins. But the initial driver for many of the founders that come to me, and of course especially social scientists who are looking for solutions to social problems, wicked social problems, will be that their research insight is applied directly in order to cause a particular kind of benefit that they foresee from their research. That's really where they're trying to go.
Okay. And Emma, thank you for that. Mark, just cutting to the central question that we have for this discussion is around maybe profit versus impact. And do we believe that they are fully compatible with each other? Do we always, or do we sometimes come across brilliant opportunities that the social impact is enormous, or the whatever impact it is enormous, but the ability to make a great term for the investor out of it is much more limited? Are they always compatible, impact and profit?
Not necessarily, and it also depends on how you define the impact, right? So the impact for me is, I think I could probably answer this by following into the previous question. For impact for me is a measurable effect caused by an intervention, whether it be technological or social or environmental, right? Now what impact you want to have is a political question, right? It's yes, it's a beneficial impact is what we're talking about here, but who are the beneficiaries? What agenda are we trying to drive here? In the UK, we have the levelling up agenda at the moment, which is being pushed by central government. How's that going to filter into everything over the next few years? People, and then Emma mentioned in the REF, the Research Excellence Framework, which is driving a lot of impact from universities. It changed between 2014 and 2021. It'll change again between 2021 and 2028. I'm interested as, and certainly with the investment fund that we put together with Impact 12, is actually looking forward to see where it's all going and where alignment is going to be. And the one framework through which there seems to be a great deal of international alignment, and that's of particular interest to Oxford and probably Cambridge as well, is around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They have impact indicators there, which are measurable, and they are internationally agreed by governments across the world, right? So that is where I'm seeing that there is alignment. But if is there an alignment between investors and between institutions like universities, and is there a compromise between making money? Well, it depends which impact agenda you're trying to drive. In the environmental agenda, for instance, it might be a very long time before you see any return on your profit. You might have to be sinking vast quantities of capital into a problem there. Whereas with the social parts of the agenda, you can actually have relatively small interventions which are scalable, but actually start returning a profit straight away. And the thing that I want to push through with the Impact 12 agenda is that in order to have a meaningful and big impact, you need to have interventions, whether they're social, environmental, or technological, which scale, because if you don't scale, you don't make any impact. And if you can scale an impact, then there is a method by which you can make money out of it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the way in which you make money will align with every investor's business model in how much money they would need to make and when. And we're finding that with the fundraising process that we've got at the moment. People are looking to make money at a different rate over a different time period. But I do believe that the only impacts that are going to scale are the ones that are going to be profitable.
Right. Okay. So that leads me on to Ed. Ed, do you see the investment community and investment models changing over time to try to better manage and accommodate this balance between, and as you presented, future planning capital being impact led but profit first? Do you think the way to deliver both is to be developing new investment models?
Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. And I think probably this question is also going to take us back to where Mark and Emma started off in terms of the definition of impact. But certainly we are seeing new structures to accommodate different appetites for different return profiles and different hold periods. But again, I think the UN SDGs have changed the impact investing paradigm. I'm probably the least qualified to talk about any long-term change because I'm relatively young, but still, I've done my homework. And so I think you went from CSR, ESG, and PRI, which looked at intra-company employment practices, resource usage, safety, governance, etc. Then you have regional impact, looking at job creation, economic development. But then you have this new thematic impact, which has taken the world by storm. So when we started, there were about $25 billion of thematic impact investing funds. There's now over 500, and that's probably an underestimation. And that focuses on where the business model and the outward potential of a company's core product or services actually solve a global challenge that is well defined, whether that's in climate change, it's within healthcare. And I think these now are at the very forefront of both corporate policy, governmental intervention and initiatives and subsidies as well as investors from a capital perspective. So this year, you've seen more climate change funds raised than ever before, billions and billions of dollars coming from institutional LPs into these funds because they see there's a huge scale to the problem. So, you know, these markets, as they're disrupted by the new technologies and new business models that we're seeing emerge, primarily from universities, especially in the life sciences and IP heavy type businesses, then as those business models, as Mark says, scale up and that product is sold and developed, then that will create impact in line with that. So when we look at companies, we're always looking for a business to be able to get to $1 billion market cap and at the same time create $1 trillion of external value or serve 1 billion people. So whether that's a vaccine or a new energy or something of the like, that's how we look through the lens. So we have segmented our investment thesis by certain markets where we believe impact and profit go hand in hand. And then the other markets where it's more difficult and more of a tension, we just put those aside. So we've mapped that from the SDGs onto our 5 areas: climate change, health, education, sustainable growth. And then we've created products which we think allow investors to be able to access each of those in a way that makes sense for them. So we have evergreen funds, which invest over a very long time horizon. And they can invest in things like nuclear fusion energy, which has been around for 30 odd years and probably will be taking another 20 to get to market. We also have our typical 2 and 20 rather 10-year funds, where investing in a life science business at the Series A or B stage does make sense, and you can have a significant amount of impact in that period, all the way through to 5-year short-term co-investment vehicles, which allow investors to get in at a later stage, but also have a significant impact in slightly more de-risked growth companies. And then as a general comment within the market, we've seen other fund structures pop up that allow investors to do a hybrid approach. So we've seen donor advised funds in the US, for example, where investors can invest in perpetual capital vehicles, which return money into them, but that money is all kept in the vehicle, so they never take a return out. But then that gives them some kind of access to a full profit fund, which gives them co-investment rights, for example, alongside it. So I think there is more innovation in terms of the structure of these things, and that is allowing more investors to invest. And I think the numbers speak for themselves on that, from that sense.
Okay, and that's, you know, we can expect to see development in those investment models and those types of investors, I'm sure, over time, and it's great to hear. Alex, here's what worries me, right? Capital markets are competitive. They're there to make money, and the better you are at making money, the more successful you're going to be. And if suddenly there is a drive to not only make as much money as you can in tech investing, but also to ensure that you're developing an impact, I'm worried that returns may be compromised and capital will go elsewhere. And we can't afford for that to happen. Am I over worrying this? Is this not a worry you have?
No, I don't think so. I think that the way the market's, I mean, for sake of argument, if you look at the oil industry, the way that's going, I mean, the money which is not going into that is going into climate change, or it goes into sustainable technology. there is a, I mean, I think there is a sort of fairly massive shift in the way that capital is being allocated, certainly within US and Europe, maybe less so in the Far East. But I think even there, if you actually look at it, where the money is actually going, is into areas which I think could broadly be classed as either sustainable or impact. I think there's a progressively reducing appetite just to invest in things which are, which just don't affect, because I think we're all, to a certain extent, we're all in it together. So I'm fairly confident. I don't see why returns should suffer if industries are changing completely. So if you're moving from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable economy, that's a complete change in an economy, which there'll be winners and there will be losers, and the winners will be the people developing the technology and implementing it, and the supply chains and all those good things going around it. I mean, if you look at electric vehicles, for example, up here, I mean, the Northeast is now becoming a real hub for that. It is a replacement for a whole bunch of stuff which was happening, which wasn't particularly sustainable 20 years ago. And so the money to be made in that is just so far beyond what was going to be made out of mature industries, which were there and so subject to massive competitive pressures. That's why those industries declined. So I don't think I'm pretty positive about that, to be honest.
Okay. And do you think that's going to be good for the investment community? Gone are the days where you want a quick in, a quick out, you're under pressure to just focus on returns. This is a longer term. Well, you never get quick in and out in deep tech, right?
Yeah. You might as well get real about that right at the beginning.
So instead of us being worried about how we manage this impact and making sure that investors get what they need back, perhaps this is something we should celebrate and be excited about. Now is the time, if there ever was a time, where impact is a real priority and an alignment across the value chain, from your capital providers all the way down to your researchers. And perhaps, if we need anything, we just need a little better alignment. And, all the research and outputs and the commercial opportunities that you guys, all of you, work with and get presented with, perhaps sometimes could be better presented in light of an impact focus. Because everything coming out of universities is publicly funded and should be there to deliver an impact for society.
Yeah, and I can't actually think of anything which, anything that I've been involved with which doesn't at least try to do that. It may not succeed, but it does at least, that is the thrust of whatever, 99.9% of the research coming out of the universities. I think what's interesting is some of the things that you're doing, Emma, around different business models for different types of impact, which is where investment returns might be different. So you may be looking for some sort of social impact, etc. And there's definitely capital which is looking in that direction, which is not looking for quite the same returns profile as maybe someone who's just looking to make 10 times their money on a venture fund. And that's absolutely fine. The interesting thing is what happens 20 years down the line with those funds when a society has improved and things have started getting better and the jobs have been getting, the housing getting better, the pollution comes down, etc., etc. And then then you may not see the impact, but the indirect impact of that can be massively economically beneficial. So, it's...
Okay, all right, okay. Maybe we were wrong in the past, right? Maybe we had the wrong thesis where we're investing in stuff coming out of universities to make money. We're investing in stuff coming out of universities to deliver impact and make money. Maybe we're all better aligned. Maybe the future is therefore going to be an awful lot brighter.
I wonder, Tim, though, whether the alignment was there all along. I mean, what is research commercialization trying to do? I think Alex hit the nail on the head there, really. I mean, all of the research that is coming out of the universities is designed to improve improve things in some way, whether that's technological or whether that's societal improvements. And we're used to working with deep tech investors as patient partners who do protect our founders and are good custodians of the technology that comes out of the universities. So that, you know, that has been in place for a very long time. That's why there are rich ecosystems built around the universities of people that we want to partner with. I think there is a separate challenge for companies that are not those kind of tech scaling companies for whom it's very hard to imagine an exit, companies who are focused on perhaps reaching a particular kind of beneficiary and are not in a position to scale that geographically. For example, if you're trying to solve problems for a particular community in North Africa, and that's really your target and that's the area of expertise, then, you know, that may not be transposable into a different context. And so we do need different partners there. But I think primarily that we may not have talked about it, but that alignment on impact and being a good custodian of the technology and of the research, I think, has been there. It just perhaps has been hidden a little.
I'm going to have to drop off, but which is a real shame, because I think this is really, really interesting discussion. So I'd love to pick it up with you guys at some point in the near future. But anyway, I'll say goodbye. And
Alex, thank you for joining us. That's great. Thank you. And we'll turn to our audience for some questions in a minute. Ed, you were nodding your head a lot there, and it might have been around how we achieve exits. And what I want to have a discussion about now, perhaps, are the challenges, right? If everything's great and everybody's well aligned, and the future looks really bright because we're all here to deliver impact out of our research, to finance impact, and to make money, and we can do all these things. Where are the challenges? Where do we need to adapt and change?
Well, I think Emma highlighted some of the challenges, and I can speak from personal experience to a few of them. But I think at the university level, you have this odd thing where publicly funded universities in the UK in particular feel uncomfortable, it would seem, making a lot of money from the innovations and the companies that emerge from their halls. So they have excellent tech transfer offices and excellent support networks to get these companies off the ground. But then if a professor is seen to make a significant payout, or the university is, then it can be a tension between the privatization, private markets, the profit incentive, and the university's mission. So you saw this with Vaxxitech and the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that ended up being a PR nightmare, which I think actually, you know, negatively affected the impact of that particular product overall, and was clearly a conflict between the company that spun out and the university itself and the investors, both at the university and externally. And so I think that's probably a slightly unique case. And with life sciences and tech companies, often it's okay and it seems to work. But certainly with the more regional impact and community interest companies, which is something that Mark actually introduced me to, and those models, then there is much more retention, I think, with the investment community and their customers, which are, you know, the other investors, the pension funds, so on. I think another challenge potentially is with venture capital funds, which links back into that. And most of them are really looking for technology companies and for life science companies where there is some kind of significant innovation and they want to scale quickly and break things. And usually to do that, you're mandated as a CEO when you're running your company to go after the biggest wins and grow revenue and grow your business. And so if you have a mandate to go out and help, you know, a particular community, say in North Africa, as you mentioned, that might not be the most efficient use of the capital that your investors have given you, and therefore mean that you go a different route. So we always go into an investment with our eyes wide open, but the company is going to pursue whichever avenue it makes sense to, with its limited capital, to scale the business to the next round. And so sometimes that means maybe going away from what, you know, the initial research was intended to go towards, or whatever else. So I think there still are tensions, particularly around some of these regional development or community interest type businesses out there that aren't as scalable as some of the other businesses that traditionally have been associated with venture capital and universities.
Yeah, Mark.
I think it comes down to the detail. I think there's an awful lot of good intention, right? But actually, when you get down to the detail of everything, that's when you start to get the ripples and the bits of misalignment. And we've already discussed the impact. I'll give you an example. There are a number of funds within the UK, for instance, impact funds, funders of funds, who only want to see that impact in the UK. Could you imagine Steve Jobs saying, I want to make an iPhone, but only sell it to Southern California. It's one of the most ridiculous funding theses I've ever seen. You want to be able to maximize the impact globally. That's what we should all be striving towards. I mean, there are lots of social problems which are specific to particular countries or sectors and regions of the world, but this idea of limiting your impact to a certain region is ridiculous from my perspective. There's also the other question comes to risk and the quantification of risk, which has been mentioned by both Ed and Emma, and the problem has been that a lot of the business models that are required to deliver impact or to optimize impact require financing in slightly different ways. So, for instance, the Impact 12 fund is a mixed fund. It provides both debt and equity instruments. And that means that people who are funding funds are going to have to move out of their comfort zone. It means that, you know, so all their knowledge of how they've invested money in the past, they have to question. They might see it as too risky because they don't have enough data to back up whether they should be putting the money into that fund, and they don't know when their money is going to come and when. And so when you're trying to start doing something new and sort of shift the agenda, that's when the good intentions then move into, sorry, it's not for us. And I think that is where you get the attrition. It's when you go through the detail.
Right, so we need to be brave as we move forward and develop these new models. We need to be entrepreneurial with our investment models and our funds, right? And we need to have the confidence to know that we can change and we can adapt and things are going to be different. I mean, is there a consensus amongst us that if we're really going to focus on delivering impact, do we see that we will, on balance, there will be a compromise on returns if we're not just cherry picking the ones that are going to make a ton of money?
Returns when is the question for me. Okay. Over what time period and how much? There are two dimensions to it.
Direct returns to investors at scales that investors can operate at the moment. I mean, maybe this is a question for Ed.
Yeah, I mean, I from a personal perspective as an investor, I don't think we'd go near some of the companies where it's purely focused on regional impact, or they are limited in some way, or we believe that it's going to take a huge amount of time and there's not a clear exit. So if we can't see that ability to make a 10x as was said previously within 10 years, then I think we're usually out. And so, you know, but we are very much one part of the impact investment spectrum, which is this thematic impact investing, profit first, looking at high scalable technological business models and technology within industries which are by definition going to be completely disrupted and changed by technology in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I can't speak for the others.
You've got something really clever here with Future Planet Capital, right? Because you've got a model where you can do both. What I see and what I'm expecting to see, and Mark, you're a great example of this, is great diversity within the investment sector. There's going to be many more different types of investment models and successful funds that will allow Emma and all her colleagues in the sector to basically more plug and play and match great commercialization opportunities to the right funds. I mean, Emma, is that something that you hope for and maybe even see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like horses for courses. So Alex talked about kind of picking the winners. The big winners in climate tech are exactly the things that will scale and will make that impact and will be profitable. And, you know, that they're exactly the kind of things that Ed and Alex it's already on their radar. They'd invest in this thing whether or not it's going to be tracked against the sustainability development goals, perhaps. There are then other kinds of companies that might be looking for a kind of sustainable model where, you know, they're providing services to government, for example. So we know that has a possibility of enormous societal impact if you can improve efficiency within a health service, or public service efficiencies. But where does the cash come from? Who are the customers? How do we kind of prove the impact? But there are increasingly both kind of incubators and accelerators focusing on that problem, so kind of actually building the companies to think through the problem and to have the right kind of stakeholders in place, and also funders who are willing to, for example, make debt investments. So I think we haven't talked very much about the mission lock. For us, if for our companies to be what we consider a social venture, they put a mission lock in place. And there are some investors for whom that is always going to be a hurdle that they won't be able to jump. But we have both traditional companies. We have a fantastic company called Zampler that came out of Cambridge a few years back, which produces plastic alternatives using pea proteins. And this company is a B Corp. Okay, so they've been through an accreditation that allows them to embed a social mission, and they are also absolutely part of our standard technology pipeline. But then I also have for example, have a company called A Spooner who invest in agritectural capabilities in the Gambia primarily, and they are scalable in terms of they can franchise, they can have new operations, but there isn't an exit, and nor would the founders desire to kind of pivot and explore something new, because their work and their impact is really embedded in that particular community. So we need a different way to interact with that kind of company.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I mean, what I see, and what I guess we want to encourage, is a continuation of the investment sector innovating to support these innovations that we're trying to develop and bring into the community. And I think what gives me a wry smile perhaps is the investment community being more entrepreneurial, taking a risk, being brave, developing and breaking the mold as we move forward. And I'm sure we all continue that communication and alignment. I'm gonna turn to some questions now from our audience online. Ejitsia, are there any questions that you'd like to bring to our panelists?
Yeah, so the first question was from Nigel Ardent, who asked whether what we were talking about at the beginning of this session was, will this become real impact in the outside world? And I think a question by Andrew from Oxentia, spin-off of Oxford University Innovation, puts a bit more context to this. So Andrew says, we are supplying laser systems to securely write an ID inside diamonds. Probably not the obvious example you'd think for impact, but if this is used to guarantee diamonds come from ethical sources and support all of the impactful results which are being delivered by diamonds, for example, a living for 10 million people, good healthcare, and education for children in Africa, helping women, would that count as impact in the view of investors?
Yeah, it's the old impact catch-all. What do we think, guys? Do we need to make sure that we're using impact in the right way and we're being very, very clear what we mean by impact?
Yes, I think you do. I think what you need to do is you need to be focusing on actual results in the real world. And to go to Professor Adams' point, real impact in the outside world. Yes, precise, clear measures and indicators where other people, other organisations are measuring that effect. And again, keep on going back to them, but the SDG indicators they are very precise measures. How much poverty is there in this region? How many people are below the poverty line? How many people have got chronic diabetes, which is 3.1.1, I think. These are very precise numbers which you can track and measure, right? So it has to have an effect on the outside world. At the same time, it also has to be proportionate to the size of the company, because impact measurement is a very it can become quite an arduous process. And if you look at there are countless impact frameworks out there, not really focused on small companies, I have to be honest. They're generally targeted. Most of them have been designed by impact investors, and for the ones that are doing the ESG reports for big companies, they are very complex, big beast reports, which are just not within the scope of startup companies. And you don't want your startup companies spending too much time measuring their impact. They have to be focused on what impact they can deliver, right? So there's a balance there. Now, in terms of the example of Obsidia, well, you've got things that you can measure there. I mean, there are SDG indicators within the effects that market has, and if you can measure that, then that is a good thing, right? With the Impact 12 fund, for instance, what we do is because they have a mission lock, saying this is the purpose, this is what the company is for, which potentially Obsidia doesn't have. But that is then wrapped up into a theory of change process where you can work out what indicators, what measurements you can make to show that, to demonstrate that you're having the effect that you're intending to have. So it is all about making it relevant to the outside world.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mark on that. We were set up around the SDGs. And so every company we look at, they have to match their product or service or business model clearly to a measurable indicator and target as defined by the UN as Sustainable Development Goals, because there's so much data out there, there's benchmarking, it's a globally accepted way of looking at things. And then, as you say, it will be impact investment metrics. So these big ESG, they cost £20,000 for PwC to come in and take up half a week of the CEO's time to get to it. So we agree that it's not perfect on the way in as an investor to try and find out what the impact is and the risks around it. The way we approach it, we have a very unrefined impact value gap approach where we look at what the company says they're going to do in their business model. We look at the people that's going to affect, the scale of the effect, the risk associated with that effect, and then do an NPV. And so we discount the impact over time, and we have a small report. It will take about half a day to do, but when you're investing in many venture companies a year and you're seeing thousands of them, it's the only way to really get things done. We'll then measure KPIs with the companies and do an audit on the way out to see what we've done. But it's a challenge, but I think most of the companies that we're looking at, go on.
It costs money though, doesn't it? I mean, it costs money to measure impact, and I suppose that is one of the key answers to your question is there a balance between impact and the amount of money that you can make? Well, if you're actually measuring the impact, it costs money. So actually, you have to be efficient in the way that you manage your fund.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, Mark. So thank you, Emma. Final question for you. Do you think our innovators and our entrepreneurs should or could be better at communicating and describing how they're going to measure their impact, instead of just focusing on traditionally the enormous market opportunity they have and how much money they're going to generate for their investors? Maybe if they focused a little more on better communicating and better measuring the impact.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it speaks as well to this. There are now more incubators and more venture builders that are not all about, can you get your Dragon's Den pitch together and put your multiples on the slide and have them flashing, that are more focused on what is your theory of change, how are you going to communicate this kind of story, and so I wonder whether to some extent the researchers are behaving in ways that they think the investment community expect when they're beginning to pitch their ideas. I don't think there are many academic researchers who are in it for the cash, right? They're generally in it because they love the research, they value expertise, they value collaboration, they want to see their research used in the outside world, absolutely want to feel that it's relevant and used. But somewhere in the bit where we're kind of training them and shaping them into a company, perhaps we're losing a little bit of that. I don't know. It's not something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but perhaps we can be doing a better job of introducing impact investment. Actually, you don't have to, sacrifice all of those hard-fought values in order to go into commercialization. There are investors out there who will be a good partner for this, who are highly innovative and perhaps are willing to take a little bit more of a risk, strangely, on a social venture rather than a kind of scaling tech giant.
Okay, Emma, thank you very much. I take all this as good news. It's not often I get to hear good news from investors. So thank you. I think we have actually run out of time. I hope that as a result of this conversation, we've we've raised the issue about impact and how it's changing, how the investment community is adapting to it, and the good news that's going to come out of that, in that we can do more, and more in the impact space, as well as still delivering to investors profit-based agendas. I'm very grateful for your time. So Mark and Emma, thank you for making the time. Ed, thank you for coming and making the time. I think Mark and Ed represent great examples of how investment models are changing to better accommodate and better enable more of our research community to deliver impact from what we're doing. Thank you, everybody, for attending online, for your questions, your comments and thoughts. And I think with that, we can all go away happy on a Wednesday afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for joining us online, and we'll catch up with you again soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks all. Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.